Hello everybody. Welcome to our next webinar, the story of leadership. And we invited, maybe you don't see me so well because of the light in the back. I shortly switched my place. Hello everybody. Nice to see you again. And for the newcomers, nice to see you. And I warmly welcome you for our next webinar that is called the story of leadership. And we invited two of our alumni. So we have Raji Gorana from India with us, and also Raydan from the Philippines, Raydan Lakson. And our host for today is Mary Alice Arthur. She's a story activist, and I will tell you more about her later. As you saw on the word map that I show you once again, we see many faces that we know from other webinars, and we are widespread around the world, what is always so nice. So we have here from Africa, from Asia, Europe, USA, and the Latin American candidates we also have with us. So this week, we entered the stage of enacting the new. So our leadership journey is developing, and we really started the process now of prototyping. And just to let you see where in our journey we are at the moment. And I shortly want to switch this slide because to learn a bit more from you, how you are here today, what are your expectations today, I just wanted to ask you, as the topic of today is storytelling, and storytelling in leadership, of course, I wanted to ask you, where do you see the power of storytelling in leadership? What are your experiences in this? Do you already have experiences in storytelling? When did you use it? And how was your experience? How did it help you? How did it support in a specific moment? And I would warmly welcome if you would join in the chat to answer this question first, to get to know you better, who's in the room, and what are your experiences. So Karen already wrote hello from Berlin. And yes, feel welcome to answer this question. I will shortly mute myself to see the answers. Okay, so Agnieszka already answered that storytelling can empower people by showing that stories do repeat and by sharing one that can grow. And she's also from Berlin. Yes, she's one of our regional facilitators. So hello, Agnieszka. Do the others also have experiences already in storytelling? Do you use it in your work context? So Julia Fitzner was writing, stories help us to learn with our hearts. Yes, that's also our view. So like storytelling is really opening the hearts and the minds of other people and to really learn what you want to tell them. So Katalin is sharing with us, to be able to tell our stories are key in understanding each other. Yes, in different cultural contexts, stories are even more important than in my cultural context, for example. So in the African context, or also in the in the Arabian context, in many cultural contexts, stories have such a wonderful power. So Heike, my colleague, is also sharing, leadership is a lot about telling a powerful narrative, telling and seeing and therefore experiencing aspects of life in a unique power way. So my name is double. So Susana Cabezas is writing, storytelling reminds us that we are working with people. And Agnieszka is sharing again, stories help to make leadership more personal, and therefore it makes it easier to follow. Kalyani Bosram, I use a technique called self-disclosure in psychological practice when it is appropriate, of course. It helps to relate to the person and identify with them, to give support, show empathy. Suzanne Serrato, over the years working in human resources, it has become obvious that always putting myself in the position of sharing that a similar experience happened to me in which I've done or experienced something similar. Yes, self-disclosure. And Daniela Becker, I have the feeling that I can't read out all of them. Now there are many, but Daniela Becker is writing, my really first reflected experience of storytelling was during a art of hosting training, and this was quite deep and inspiring. And I also think that a lot of everyday life you can find storytelling without naming it or using it as powerful tool. Great thing and lives with the persons which tell and listen. Yes, and Art of Hosting, our host of today, Mary Alice Arthur, is also very active in Art of Hosting. And just the last quote that I want to share with you is also from Julia. And she's writing, I'm right now working in the question in how far storytelling can support transformative learning. So I stop here. Thanks for sharing. So you see, you already have many experiences, and I think even if you think about it and there's nothing coming to your mind, I think in so many different experiences in your life, it was so much about storytelling. So the average day life depends so much on that. So I shortly want to show you who is with us today. So we have, as I said, Raji Gorana from India that you see on the top. Then we have Raydan Lakson from the Philippines. They are both alumni from GIZ programs and both are winners of our Change Leadership Award 2013. Our host of today is Mary Alice Arthur that you see below the two alumni of us. Just shortly to tell you a bit about the Change Leadership Award, because Raji and Raydan are two of 5 winners of this award. And the Change Leadership Award was announced from us, from our leadership group last year, and it encouraged our alumni from different programs to send in their prototypes, as we announced it also in this week of the MOOC. So to say what change came to the organizations or what part of society was changed by their prototypes. And we had different programs that were eligible to participate. So we had the Climate Leadership Plus program, and we had the Managing Global Governance program, and we had the Education for Sustainable Development program. So they are all focusing on leadership issues, but from different angles, to say more on the diplomatic side, like the Diplomacy Development program that Raydan was participating, or more on global issues, or like our program, the Climate Leadership Plus program, is focusing a lot on the topics of climate change. And with this, I shortly want to present you our host of today, Mary Alice Arthur. She's a story activist, and she's specialized in using story in services of positive systemic shift and to access and create collective intelligence on critical issues. And her art is creating and hosting spaces for voice action, as you will see today, and a narrative practice forms a key part of her work. So she's art of hosting steward and has her own company that is called the Significant Orientations Amazing Results. And to let her speak a bit more herself, I would invite Mary Alice now to take the microphone.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you here and see everybody touching base from different locations. I'm in Copenhagen at the moment, staying with a friend, and you can see behind me that I probably have the ultimate storyteller's room at the moment. There are so many books on the shelf. It's just fantastic. So nice to be with you for this brief period of session number 5, and I've been seeing some of the exciting work you're doing, so I'm looking forward to hearing some stories and stepping with us into sharing practice stories and working with the power of those. So I want to say something briefly about the power of story, then how we're going to work with the practice stories we're hearing, and at the end of our time together we'll have a bit of an open forum about what we've learned from these practice stories. And before I go into the power story, just want to invite you also to more resources on my website. I've got a bunch there on storytelling, how to craft stories, how to work with stories, and gee, it could be like, welcome to the 6-month course, but here we are for an hour today. So looking forward to that. I want to go to the next slide now. Do I do that, Susanna, or do you do that for me? Okay, so something about stories. Stories are really what makes us human. They're encoded into us, and I heard a colleague say yesterday, you know, at age 5, probably you were the most brilliant storyteller on the planet. You were creative, you were innovative, nothing could stop you, and everything around you was a story. So storytelling is intrinsic to who we are as humans, and they're what make us human. I guess you could say stories are the library of humanity, and the stories we decide to shape, and the ones we decide to tell, and the ones we decide to live into and are living in are actually impacting who we become, what societies we are living in, and where we can go in the future. And one thing I've really learned about stories, you can see that here on the left, is that the emotion in a story is what awakens creative action in us. So we get hooked by the form of a story. If someone was reading us out an Excel spreadsheet, it wouldn't have nearly the power and the pull that a good story has, even if it covers the same data. So stories are really what we use to make sense of the world. It's our lens on the world. So you could really say that if you change your story, you do change the world, because you change the way you look at it, the way you interact with it, and where you can possibly go in the future. And today we have 2 examples of stories that are of practice that are beginning to change the places they're in. But before we move to those, I wanted to say something about how stories work. And you can see those 3 bubbles at the top of this page, the blue speech bubbles. And the way stories work in our mind is, first of all, we fill in the blanks. I don't know if you're like me. I'm probably on the intelligence scale a mismatcher. In other words, I can see where things are missing. And so when I'm reading something, I can see where there's a typo or an error or any of that kind of stuff. But our brains automatically do that around stories too. We fill in the blanks. So if I was to say to you, there was a king standing on the balcony, each of you would see that king in a different way. You would fill in the blank. And then we could compare notes about what does our king look like versus what does your king look like. What does royalty and regalness actually look like? The brain fills in the blanks. So that's one way that our brains work with story. Secondly, we focus on characters. We really love to know who is in the story. Who is this about? And who is interacting with the person who is, we would call that the protagonist in the story. Who's the protagonist, the one who is the core of the story? And how are we working with them? And that's a thing that our brain does too. It focuses on characters. But a character doesn't have to be a human. A character can be the perfect storm out at sea, or the triple disaster happening in Japan, or anything else. So big weather events often are characters in their own right. So a character doesn't always have to be a person. The third thing I wanted to say about stories is we relate every story to every other story we've heard. We have this element in our brain that allows us to match one story with another. So one good reason to listen to practice stories is we can begin to hear things that match with our story and that we can use. And that's what we're going to do today. So if you're going to create a story and you're prototyping now, know why you're telling it. Why are you telling this? So know your audience a bit. Construct it in your mind so all the pieces are fitting with you, and then tell it authentically so it's true for you. So I've had people say to me often, is that a true story you're telling? It doesn't necessarily have to be true as in factual, as long as it is emotionally true, authentically true, and it's making the point I want to make. So that's something to remember about storytelling and construction. And now I want to say something about the process we're going to use. So if I could have the next slide, that would be great. We're going to do something called a collective story harvest. And this is something that's come out of the art of hosting practice. And art of hosting is about using methods and practice that help people collaborate and step into group-wise action together. And we've learned that stories are really powerful in doing that. And we've also learned when we share our practice stories and learn from them, it's a really powerful thing too. So we developed this little method called collective story harvest. In other words, how can we as a group listen to stories of practice and harvest them. And I'm using that word harvest just out of the farming lore of and collecting and hunter-gathering too, that when we harvest something, we pick the fruits of it, and we can distill those fruits. Some people like wine, some people, like a friend of mine says that ascended grape is actually what champagne should be called. So how do we use the fruits that we've gathered to make our own work more potent and more powerful? So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the process we're going to use. So I'm going to introduce that process right now. That's the first step. Then I want to tell you about the harvesting themes. What are we going to listen for? Because we've figured out when you listen for a purpose, you actually hear a lot more than you thought, and we can share it with each other. So I want to invite soon everyone to choose a theme. Choose one of these themes I'm about to introduce as the thing you are going to be listening to these two stories for, and making some notes. We're going to do some collective harvesting in a Google Doc in order to share some notes with each other about what we've learned out of these practice stories. Then we're going to introduce to you the storytellers one at a time, and we're going to hear the stories. While we're hearing the stories, really asking you to keep that theme you have chosen in mind and make some notes about it so the rest of us can see them. And we're going to ask one person on each of those teams to be a vocalizer, somebody who in fact doesn't take notes, but watches the notes happening, and then at the end gives us 2 or 3 really key gold nuggets that you've noticed that people have harvested out of the stories. Then while we are reporting on our harvest, the storytellers are going to listen quite carefully to us. So Raja and Radon are going to listen, and then they're going to share back with us what they have learned out of what we've learned from their stories. So this is really kind of a process that goes a bit like this. So the storytellers are going to report on their harvest, and then we hope at the end to have about 10 minutes or so where all of us can share some of our insights and big learnings from these two practice stories that could work well for our own prototyping. So the harvesting themes. Be looking out here and say, which one of these appeals to you most? Because that's the one you want to choose to listen to the story through. So first of all, what can we learn about leadership from this story? We're on that whole theme of leadership. So what can we learn about leadership from this story? Secondly, what personal practices did we hear about in this story that could be helpful in staying focused and grounded while pursuing our projects? It's kind of easy to get overwhelmed or sometimes even despondent because something isn't working. Is there something you could do? Some people meditate, some people run, some people have long showers, some people bathe, some people play with the dog. Some people focus on their goals even more. What are the personal practices that could help us stay grounded and focused? Number 3, where was the new enacted? And that's the name of this session, really, enacting the new. So where was the new enacted? And what does that stimulate me to think about? Number 4, what questions arise from this story that could be asked anywhere and be helpful? So just brainstorming stories that are questions that arise, because a powerful question is a powerful thing. And if we can find some questions out of these stories, all of our colleagues who couldn't come today might be able to ask themselves those and make their own project even stronger. And finally, what can I immediately use in my own prototype? So listening to the stories from the thought of your own prototype and really listening for what can I use right now. So those are the harvesting themes. So we want to ask you to harvest into a Google Doc, and maybe I want to ask Karen, do you want to say something about that, or how do we show people? Can we put the link in this chat window so people know where the Google Doc is?
Yes, hello to everybody. I think Susanna, have you opened it? And I guess if, then it's there. You click on the agenda, and do you see it now? Question to everybody. Do you see the doc? Otherwise, I copy the link in the chat, and you can take it from there. Ah, it's coming. So maybe just some don't see it. So I will additionally copy the link to the chat to the document in the chat, and you can copy it from there. So we are trying this for the first time with the Google document. So it's an experiment.
Ooh. Yes, we're experimenting on every level.
Yes. So, and then try to copy it to the chat, and it does not work. Maybe someone could help me. Could someone copy the link there? That would be wonderful. I have some problems with my...
Yeah, it wasn't letting me put it in there either. So if somebody else can copy it in.
Ah, there it goes. Yes,
Yes,
now
I
we have it
copied it.
twice. You can
Unfortunately,
just...
it's not the link itself, so you have to copy paste it in your browser.
Yes.
So essentially on the Google Doc, you'll see there's each of these harvesting arcs are listed, and then I've put in italics there, in this team. So if you put your name in there, in this team, then we know who's chosen to be in which team. And maybe one of you can choose yourself as the focalizer and put your name in bold or in some other, or in color, in some other way. Let us know that you're going to be the person who's going to give us the nuggets at the end. So right underneath where it says in this team, there's one bullet point that's to get you started in your harvesting. So let me just put Heike up here so that the harvesting can start there. Great. I can see some of them coming in already. And maybe while we're doing this, Susanna, you could introduce our first storyteller, and then I'll just say something before she starts.
Yes, sure. So I don't want to show the slide now because then you don't see the doc anymore. So our first storyteller is Raji Gorana. She's from India. And Raji is working for is program coordinator at the Center for Environment Education. And this is the Center for Excellence of Ministry and Environment of Forest in India, sorry. And she works with groups and children's media unit. And she's focusing on developing teaching and learning support material and capacity building. And the prototype she will present is focusing on the e-learning course. And she was implementing this e-learning course as a prototype and really implemented within her organization. But this she will tell you herself. So Raji, that's your floor. Raji, can you unmute yourself? Clicking on the microphone left to your name. Yes.
Thank you, Susanna.
Yeah, you're
Hi,
welcome.
everyone.
Hi, Raji.
Thank you, all of you, for joining in the webinar to listen to our stories. But I must tell you one thing, it's much easier to listen to a story than tell one yourself, and that too from your own experience, because you need to glean the learnings and those must be of value to your listener. And I hope I'll do a good job because I'm doing it for the first time. I've written reports about my
Raji,
internship.
can you just try to speak a bit louder?
Hello, am I audible now, Susanna? Is that better?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay. I was just trying to tell that it's so difficult to tell your own story than listen to one, because you need to really be careful in gleaning the learnings, and those should be of value to everyone. And I'm hoping that I'll do a good job. So Susanna was kind enough to introduce me as a material developer with the Center for Environment Education in India. And as a material developer, my job is to develop material that supports teachers in their work, particularly to implement environmental education. And through the teachers, reach out to the students so that they understand the value of environmental education and contribute to sustainability. So the goal is really big. Now in this goal, my job as a material developer is I see is quite challenging. But to that role, there's also a dream that whatever I develop, whatever books I write, they reach every teacher, and that every teacher benefits from that material and is able to do her job a little better. Now, when I say teacher um, and every teacher, what is it that every teacher means? For a country like India, I'll give you some statistics to say what teachers mean. There are something like 1,285,000 elementary teachers. The number is whopping, and that's a record of 2008-9. I don't have the latest statistics. By elementary, we mean all those teachers that reach out to children between the age groups of 6 to 12 years. And where are these teachers located? They are located in 633 districts. In India, districts are administrative units, which are in all the spread all across India. I mean, the territory. And when we say districts, we are also talking about teachers who speak different language, who service children of different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, different ecological realities. Um, so the word teacher, though looks very simple, is quite complicated and quite complex, because it has the numbers, the spread, and the context in which they belong, the context to which they belong. Um, so when I write a material, or when I do face-to-face trainings, I can keep the hope that the book would have reached to probably 1,000 teachers or 2,000 teachers. Similarly, when I do a face-to-face workshop, probably I would have reached out to 20 teachers at a time. Now, all this, in a country like India, has lots of implications. Implications of time, money, effort, reach, probably even the kind of the language in which you communicate, and the list goes on. you know Now, which means that, if my dream has to become truth, I have to really look at scaling up, which means reach out to more and more teachers. And that is when I think I would have done justice, or I would have told myself that, okay, at the end of the day, I know that, my book is just not with 1,000 teachers, or that the training that I've imparted is just not for 20 teachers or 40 teachers. The other angle to my work is that, in India, environmental education is compulsory by law, which means every school has to impart it. But that's a very recent decision of the country. It's just 10 to 12 years old now, which means teachers traditionally have been trained in other subjects, but not certainly in environmental education. So there's a need actually to reach out to practicing teachers who are already in their jobs, probably who have joined quite some time ago, and who are used to doing things in a certain way, and they are supposed to take on this responsibility of imparting environmental education. You know, Coming to Center for Environment Education, that it's been doing quite good work. We develop a lot of material on a whole lot of themes. It could be tigers, water, hand washing, deserts, desertification, you name it. We have all the, I mean, we've invested our time in understanding how do we communicate these complicated concepts to teachers, just not in terms of the content, but how do you actually transact these with children, specific age groups. What is it that they can receive, process, understand, and probably react to, or come back. And the other aspect also being that how do you align this learning to their own local context. Water in India doesn't just mean just water. In an arid region, it means less water. In a river basin, it means more water. In a coast, it means the 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 sea water and the fresh water and the interface between them. So actually, whatever you're teaching is just a part of it. You have to capacity build the teacher to receive this process and apply it to the context that she comes from. So CE has invested a lot of time in understanding, how do you actually communicate or train or capacity build teachers. So there's a lot of wisdom already. Um, but the other thing is, CE is just not the only official body to train teachers. It's not on the response on the shoulders of CE that you should go out and reach every teacher and train her or capacity build her. CE essentially looks at developing prototypes. That's where it sees its strength is. You know, use your experience, reach out to the field where actually it matters. Trial out things, understand what works, what doesn't. You know how it should be communicated, any concept, how a concept should be communicated. All these make an important part of developing a prototype. And when I say material development, most of my material that I've developed is in a prototype mode. There is this material, it's taken up by different groups, probably a teacher, textbook writer, and parts of it are adapted, used, and you can do various things with the prototype. So that is where my work stands, and that is where CE's work stands, and that is where the challenge is of reaching out to numbers. Now, one simple question anybody could ask me is, when you say you have to reach out to so many numbers of teachers, why are you not considering open and distance learning as a solution? Why don't you just take the addresses of the teachers and post this material, and probably they'll be good enough to have received them and use them as per their convenience. Yes, certainly that is a solution, and CE works. CE has a course called the Green Teacher. There are modules in it. There is a face-to-face component, and the material goes out to teachers who enroll and they benefit from this. But again, there are limitations to this. You need to actually identify teachers, post them, the material, and service these teachers. So you cannot say that after posting you just say, okay, I am done with it, and probably teachers want to know more about a particular project. They want to get further understanding on using a methodology or carrying out a project or addressing a problem that has come up. So what is the solution to all this? That's when I got this opportunity to join this ZIZ course in Germany on education for sustainable development. Now, I was very happy, but they asked me to give an idea for an innovation project. And being a material developer who is always, at the back of the mind worried that, I don't know how many teachers this material will go to, how many teachers can I influence? I thought there must be some way in which the influence can be scaled up, And I thought probably this course gives me the best opportunity to think of technology mediated learning. Indians are great at taking to technology. I must tell you, we use it for we use mobile technology and internet technology to do a whole lot of things. Just not to mine information, but to network, to buy train tickets, to buy merchandise. We use it for lodging complaints, sharing recipes, blogging our wisdom. There are so many blogs which can tell you about a festival or elections in India or anything. So we are, as such, the country has taken to technology very well. So there's this, immense opportunity that technology itself was providing. because people are already using it. They're getting comfortable with it. So I thought, why don't I look at technology mediated learning? And that is when e-learning, I thought that I should work in the field of e-learning. And the course provided a great opportunity in terms of just not learning about sustainable development, but giving me time for an internship with an organization, you know, that works in technology mediated learning. It works with community radio, it works with on e-learning, on open educational resources available on the net, on various aspects related to reaching out uh, widely. And I got this 2 months opportunity. It gave me this feeling of being immersed in the area that I really wanted to work in, engage, and also understand the nitty-gritty, the challenges, the assumptions that I came up, I had in this mind. For instance, I was very upbeat when I said e-learning. I said, oh my God, it's such a good thing. I'm going to reach out to so many people and it's going to be fun.
Just 1
Okay,
minute to
time up,
go.
but okay. Um, and then when I got into my project mode with the organization, they said, stop, technology is not available to all the teachers. There's no electricity in villages. And, you know, technology mediated learning for now only delivers in English. What about the other regional languages? And they said adults have lesser attention than, you think. They can't read that much text on sitting at one place. They're so used to, I mean, particularly teachers, they're so used to teaching. So it was in this internship that I learned about the challenges, the assumptions that I made, what I need to be wary of, what can I be really upbeat about. And importantly, it gave me an idea to wear different hats, understand technology, understand my own content in terms of an adult learner's abilities to process, and also look at instructional design. How do you actually write? I mean, it was so easy to write. It is so easy to write a book for me because I know there's a linearity to it and there is something very fixed about it. It's done, it goes out. But in an online platform, I think these assumptions completely change. So I needed to look at understand instructional design. I needed to understand the whole implementation process because it's a live thing, it's like in a workshop, from time to time you're in charge and you need to know where it is going, how well it is it meeting your objective or not? And so there's a liveness to an e-course. And so, I got a whole lot of time to grapple with all these issues, and I feel much empowered now, having had the luxury of working with an organization that had experience, but bringing my own organization's learnings. Environmental education is what we understand very well. Content is an area that we know very well. What is it that works when it is water education or sanitation education or talking about tigers? That's when I find myself in a position of strength, in a position of feeling of um, being on a strong footing to take ahead my innovation project. After all the training in Berlin, I came back and I found a partner who is ready to invest money and time with me so that I can actually use this as a sandbox to, you know, um, feel, know actually what it means to implement and what are the hiccups and what is the positives that you get out of this experience. This becomes a prototype for the organization and for me, and then we hope to really scale it up when the opportunity strikes in terms of government calling us or probably a funder out there saying that, really we want to invest money and provide you the technology. I don't know, but I find that there is a lot of hope. I know that this is going to um, change the way that I've done things, just traditionally done things, to a much more um, what do you call, cutting edge kind of
Yeah, thank you, Raja. That's
okay,
fantastic.
okay.
Wonderful. I could listen to you the rest of today and ask a lot of questions. So this is our first story of practice, a real prototyping across diversity and across real challenge. So imagine upping the challenge more to include conflict and conflict of a very large level. So I'd like to invite Susanna to invite our second storyteller to tell his story.
Yes, thank you, Mary Alice. So our second storyteller is our alumnus from the Development Diplomacy Program, Ray Danilo, in full name C. Luxon. Raydan, we call him. And he's working usually for the Institute for Autonomy and Governance, based in Cotabato City in the southern islands of Mindanao in the Philippines. And as many of you will know, it's not a very, there are some conflicts since several years that were worse at a different time, but that are still there. And he's working there to expand and consolidate the network of organizations and leaders to promote autonomy and self-determination as a means of addressing the causes of conflict. And there he really formed, after his participation in the development diplomacy program in Germany from GIZ, from my point of view, very ambitious and nice prototype working with the armed forces in the Philippines. And therefore, I would like to invite Raydan to introduce himself and tell more about his prototype. Raydan, can you unmute yourself?
And just to let you know what I'll do in this case, after 5 minutes, I'll ring the bell, and just 1 minute to the end I will as well, just to give you a time check.
And Raydan, can you also use
Hello.
camera? Hi, Raydan. Can you use camera
Hello.
also so that people can see you?
Yeah.
Is it possible?
Yeah. Okay.
Ah,
Hi.
very
Good
nice.
evening.
Okay, I mute myself.
You
Welcome.
see me now?
Yes, we see you and we hear you. Very good. Thanks.
Yeah. Once again, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Susanna and Mary Alice, and also to my fellow storyteller tonight, Raji, and all the rest of you guys. So I immediately now start with my own story of my engagement back in the Philippines. As Susanna has pointed out earlier, I live in the southernmost island of the Philippines, which is Mindanao. It is the one of the three larger islands in the country, which is actually experiencing armed conflict. And the armed conflict between the government and the indigenous separatist group has been raging on for a long, long while. Many would say 40 years, but many would say even more than 40 years. So that is the context where I engage as a peace worker. And in my entry into the peace work, there were already several groups and peace practitioners who were involved in processing the conflict and the peace issues. And as I came in, I tried to survey what do we already have, what do we already accomplished, and what do we know. And at that point, I was certain that we already know the history of the conflict. People have been telling about it, people have been presenting their own versions, and most of the time, each of this version was in conflict or in competition against each others. And that is understood because, as we say, history as constructed is also contested, which adds to the conflict. And while on it, at least we know that the peace process is already being undertaken. And at one point, they agreed on some big terms already, but later on, they also, I mean, the two parties, the government and the separatist group, also had their own share of violating their agreement. So it was off and on most of the time. And the casualties are increasing in number. And when I came in also to join actively in the peace practice, the peace education program was just recently institutionalized in the university where I started to work. So it came down as the pioneering higher educational institution that institutionalized a peace program in school all over the country. And together with the peace education program, also an aggressive interfaith program was being implemented. And the actors, I mean the rebel groups and the representatives, and also the government are participating in these programs. So all in all, we see that the context where I was coming in was not coming from zero. People were already engaged in a lot of activities and programs just to mitigate the situation, and the ultimate aspiration was to help solve or resolve the conflict. But then I was thinking very, very seriously why in all this there was always a constant recurrence of conflicts, and it seems that the final solution or even the narratives about how to achieve the final solution was not forthcoming. People were simply telling motherhood statements such as, we want peace, we want unity, but the actual steps and the concrete suggestions how to go about it and achieve it was not coming. So this was the thing that really triggered me to think very, very deeply what is lacking. And the events, the events came down as you know, it is successful and then it fails. I mean, the agreement and all the efforts. For example, in 1997, they started out agreeing on a ceasefire. So both the rebels and the government, it was the first agreement, which was very, very promising ceasefire. That was in 1997. And then they undertook the first steps for a formal negotiation. But then in 2000, the government declared an all-out war in order to finally destroy the rebel stronghold, which the government was able to do, overtake the mother camp of the rebels. But it did not stop the conflict. And then in 2001, they again invoked the ceasefire and agreed to bring in the international monitoring team to help in the monitoring and sustainability of the ceasefire. So it was holding for a while, but then in 2003, once again, there was a breakdown of the ceasefire and atrocities ensued. And and the peace workers and the international monitoring team tried to manage it. And after 4 or 5 months, ceasefire was in place again, and they signed an agreement for memorandum of agreement on the ancestral domain, which is about the territory. But then in 2008, that same agreement also triggered a large explosive recurrence of conflict, which at one point generated about 600,000 evacuees or internally displaced persons, the biggest in the world that year. And you see, it's like that, off and on, off and on. So in the middle of this, I was thinking what to do, what was being overlooked in the process, because everything seems to be involved. So I was thinking, what was lacking? I think that is the telling point to me. I was not thinking the way the general thought of my colleagues was heading towards. I was thinking the other way around, trying to ask the question, what is lacking or what has gone wrong? And I noticed that even though a lot of actors were already involved in trying to manage the conflict, one, I noticed one very strategic actor was lacking in was not being factored in the whole process, and this is the army or the military. At that point, I thought that the military should be involved because, as often is the case, the discourse around the military is that they are simply part of the enforcement of law and order by the government. And they are like a machine that can be ordered to go where and what to do. They don't say anything. That is the general discourse around the military. But I was thinking that the military, being on the front line, as always being said that they are the frontline fighters, warriors. If they are, then they can also be frontline peace ambassadors. So, with that thought, I recalled that in my training in Germany in 2007 with the GIZ, we were trained into conflict mapping and conflict negotiation and regional crisis management. So I tried to construct a more contextually based design for conflict mapping, which I intended to uh, train for the military. But then the first hurdle was how to convince the university where I was employed at that time to undertake such an engagement because, you know, it's a far-fetched idea to have the university engaged in the military. But I tried to convince
We
the
have about a
administrator.
minute to go.
Yeah,
We have a minute to go, Raven.
okay. So, and then uh, that was the start of that. I was able to convince the administrator, and we tried to scout who among the military commanders would be favorable to the idea. For a while, it did not hold among the military commanders, but at least there was one who said yes to us. And so we trained. The 603rd Brigade commander allowed his brigade to be trained in conflict mapping. And when the 2008 conflict erupted, this brigade used that technique in trying to solve the conflict in their area, even as the other brigades were into the fighting. And after, when the fighting abated, they realized that the 603rd Brigade did not encounter a big confrontation with the rebels because they applied the technique. And because of that, the commanding general of the whole brigade or the whole infantry allowed the program to be implemented in the whole infantry. So it came down to us, as I would make the story short, it came down to us that after that training, there was already a recorded zero encounter between the rebels and the government forces because the soldiers had a different frame of mind now. And as we all know, last March 18, 2014, the rebels and the government signed the final peace agreement. And well, the next chapter of the success of this final peace agreement is yet uh, to come, and we hope that it will be coming more successfully. So my take-home lesson here is that the belief in human innate character and desire to reach out and to communicate, because it started out with stories. One soldier or one officer telling the other officers about the story of their success, and snowballed.
Fantastic.
Thank
Fantastic.
you.
Thank you so much. So now I want to invite the groups that have been harvesting to report back. So is there someone from team number 1? The question, what can we learn about leadership from this story? Is there somebody from that team who would be willing to give us some feedback on 2 or 3 of they think are the top nuggets in the list that you have brainstormed here during the time you were listening to the story? So has somebody allocated themselves as the vocalizer? So is it Amelia? I'm looking at the chat and seeing how people are going. Is it you? Who's it? Can I call on Amelia? And you would need to turn your microphone on, or we need to give Amelia the microphone.
Hello? Can you
Hello?
hear me?
Yes? So what I'm looking for are 2 or 3 points out of your harvesting. What can we learn about leadership from this story? What are the 2 or 3 most important points? Did we lose her? Oh, there she is. Amelia, are you there?
Hello?
Hello?
Is it my voice clear?
Not so very clear, but go ahead, see what happens. We're not hearing you right now.
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes?
Hello? Yeah?
Okay. Can you hear me back?
Is it my voice clear?
Yes, can you keep speaking?
Hello? Yes?
It sounds like she can't hear us at all, so maybe we're
Okay.
getting to the
from the 2.
Hello?
Amalia, it seems that your voice connection is not stable. Could you maybe try to write what you would like to say in the chat? Would that work for you? While we go to the other question, and then we can read out what you have written.
Okay, so shall we move on to number 2? What personal practices did we hear about in this story that could be helpful in staying focused?
Hello, it's Julia, so I'm going to vocalize what we wrote.
Thank you.
So I think what is one very important nugget is that it's very important to stay, to find like-minded partners and to exchange and broaden your network. This, I think, is one point which came out. And another very important point, or one other nugget, would be to stay optimistic and to connect on a personal level.
Thank you. And number 3, so we have question number 3, which is, where was the new enacted? What does that stimulate me to think about? We have Susanna, Rainer, and Jörg who are harvesting here. So one of you speak on to that.
Yes, I would encourage Rainer or Jörg to speak because I'm talking enough. And as I was distracted also by chatting and solving problems. So maybe Rainer or Jörg, would you like to do it? Yes, thanks, Rainer.
Hello, is this enough with the voice?
Yes?
Maybe a bit louder, but then it's fine.
Louder, like this?
Oh, he's louder.
Okay. So I go to the list and have a look. Um, two or three things out of our list. One for me is prototyping locally. Where was the new enacted? And and in the second story, programs at schools for the first, and the most big or the biggest point was to get the soldiers who were on the front line into a program where they could develop a different mindset. I think this, the actors in the fire, to get them into another thinking.
Fantastic.
That's from our side, I guess. Probably Jörg, if you would like to.
Well, actually, we probably need to move on now to the
Yes.
next one. Number 4, what questions arise from this story that could be asked anywhere and be helpful? So this was a very prolific team. I had some questions I was asking in there too. So which one of you would like to choose 2 or 3 questions to share with the group? Have we got anybody from team number 4? And can you hear me is probably the question. Am I still on? Yep.
I can hear you well.
Oh,
and
good.
I could suggest maybe to read out the contribution from Amalia and hope that Team 4 has decided then who will
Fantastic.
share. What was again the question? So I will read out the chat from Amalia.
Question number 1 is, what can we learn about leadership from this story?
Thank you. Amalia says, leadership always connects to dream, vision, creativity, and hope.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership is always keeping the feet on the ground, contextual approach and issues. And I see Zainab started to share something back for question 4, and
Okay.
she probably cannot speak. But there's a fault point from Amalia. Sorry, I just see it's below in the chat. Leadership is also about understanding what works and what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And leadership is being able to convince the key actors also.
Fantastic. Zainab says, I can hear you, but I can't see the document. So is there another one from the team? And in the meantime, let's go to number 5, because Catalin has highlighted her name. What can I immediately use in my own prototype? What did you think in team 5?
Katalin, do you want to unmute yourself to talk? I know that you know how it's working because you already did in other webinars. So click on the left button to your name. So Kalyani is asking if she can write down the question in the chat. Yes, of course you can.
Mm-hmm.
Then we read it out.
So do we have, that was number 5 team. Do we have a number 4 team?
Maybe we'll read it out, Mary Alice.
Mm-hmm.
As time is also running out of, we are running out of time.
We're running out of time. Okay. So just to close this off, I want to ask the storytellers just to, from what they've heard and what they've seen, is there one statement from you? Is there something that we as listeners have picked up that has given you a new look at your own story. So I don't know if you've seen the document, but what I want to point out here is that good listening makes an even better story than before. And the power of your listening can create a much better story or a much deeper story than you expected. So Raya or Raydan, is there anything you've seen or heard from our just brief harvest? And we'll put the document out. I think there's some fantastic questions, especially that anybody could use. So just one comment from each of you to close off this session. What have you learned either in telling this story or in hearing people harvesting back on the story? And you would have to unmute yourselves too.
May I speak?
Yes, Katalin, even if
Oh, thank you so
can give it
much.
now. And then later we give Raji and Raydan to say the closing words, maybe. Okay, Katalin,
Yes.
go on.
So thank you so much. I just noticed how to come back to Saba meeting. Sorry, I was too busy writing still, but feel free to read it. So I just want to say that I totally checked out for the second one. I'm sorry, but my brain was, or my mind was going very fast and putting things together last minute. So yeah, I have to focus on and be very practical where I am, and how I can make a biggest difference as fast as I can, yet being very practical at the same time. So I can be all over the globe and map. So that's what I just wrote there. That's why I checked out. So I think it's totally okay to check out when you get a point and you just keep going with it. You write it out until you're ready to actually manifest it. That's my 2 cents worth right now for myself, and I hope it helps the work.
Thank you very much. And could we have a closing comment from our two storytellers just to finish off this session? Just very briefly.
Hi, Mary. Sorry. There is a power, you know. People were listening and they have processed whatever I was telling into very concrete learnings, which means people really listen, and you have to be you have to ensure that you tell your story in such a way that probably the wisdom or the nuggets that you missed, the listener has picked them up. You know, you just went by as a fact or a happening, or you're just trying to say something, but the listener has actually turned it into a nugget.
Thank you.
You know, yeah.
Okay. And Raydan, anything from you? Or not. And by the way, thank you for being with us. It's almost midnight or past midnight in Sydney where you are. So thank you for staying up and being part of this session so late. Doesn't seem like we have Raydan back on. But may I thank all of you for your deep listening. I'm going to go through this document and just clean it up a bit so it's available for everybody. I think all of the harvesting is really valuable, and especially the questions that people brainstormed anybody could use might be really valuable for all of us. So thank you all for that work. And I encourage you to keep working with your stories and to use storytelling to help you in your prototyping and really get someone good to listen to you to help for that. Thank you very much for asking me to be part of this.
Yes, thank you, Mary Alice, also from my side. And thank you to our storytellers, Raji and Raydan, even if Raydan was not able to say goodbye now. So if you have the chance to take the mic still, you can do it, of course, Raydan. And yeah, a warm, not welcome, but thank you also to all our participants today. And yeah, to close the session, I just wanted to ask you to share for the last time in the chat. So what stood out for you? What questions are still there? And of course, we will share the document that we were writing on today. So everybody will have the results from today also to read them. We will upload them, or we will see how to share. We will have a look if it's able to upload them on a MOOC space or if it's better to share only with us. And yeah, thank you to everybody for joining. So we are already 10 minutes after 4 o'clock in Germany at least. And I would say, yeah, we see next time. So on Monday, we have the next open space session. And this is on the prototype presentations. So all participants who want to present their prototypes that they are designing at the moment in week 5, enacting the new, you are invited to join us and to give a short presentation of what you are working on at the moment or what you are aiming at to work at. And yes, everybody is invited to join, and we will give you more the mics, and it will be your space this time. So for many people, it's holiday today, so have a nice holiday today. And I hope to see you soon again. Have a nice day. Bye bye.